Hi, guys. How are you? Welcome again to another beautiful week. Today, we have a really exciting guest, someone who we're so privileged to receive in the community. Her name is Theresa Reed, and she is more popularly known as the Tarot Lady on Instagram. And Theresa, thank you so much for joining me today and for entertaining us with your light and your wisdom and everything that you believe in. And I know you're going to be inspiring us a lot with everything you're going to be sharing and what we'll be talking about today. So can you introduce yourself first and foremost to us today?
Sure. First of all, thanks for inviting me here, Stephanie. I'm a Gemini, so I love to talk. So I love having little chats like this with people, and I'm really honored that you reached out to me. My name is Theresa Reed. I'm known as the Tarot Lady. I have been a professional tarot reader for over 30 years, and I am the author of many books. I have 6 currently under my belt and 2 more on the way next year. And I love to talk about tarot and astrology, and I teach tarot and astrology, which is also one of my favorite things to do. I adore teaching. I am the mother of 2 grown children and a very, very, what would I say, belligerent cat. And I live in the mighty fine state of Wisconsin, which I've lived for most of my adult life. So that's a little about me.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. That's great to have speaking to you from the US too. We're in Canada over here for the most part. So that's a nice connection to have as well. And I'm very grateful for your presence, really and truly. It's very humbling. So you speak about having done this work for quite some time. Mm-hmm. And I would love to know, actually, before we dive in, what I would love to know is what is your favorite beverage to start your day off with?
My favorite beverage to start my day off is green tea, just really plain. I don't want mint in it. Mint makes me really grouchy. I don't want any fruit in it. I don't want honey in it. I don't want lemon. I want it plain green tea. So I always start off with that. And once in a while, I go to Starbucks. I used to be a Starbucks junkie with these refreshers. And then they stopped carrying them for a while and I got really mad. So I said, I'm not going to ever go there again. Well, now they started carrying it. And my daughter brought me one today, but I kind of don't have the same taste for it. So mostly I drink green tea and water all day. And I might have a glass of wine at night, but that's about the only things I drink. I'm not a milk drinker. I hate milk. So that's it. I'm pretty boring.
No, I love that. I love a good green tea. My question for you is going to be so strange, perhaps, but with green tea, I always struggle that I oversteep it. How long do you steep your green tea for?
Well, I steep it for a very, very short time. And I always have a running joke. I say, I like my tea like I like my men, kind of weak. My husband hates that joke. And he's not weak, but I just think it's kind of a funny joke.
So it is a funny joke.
Yeah, I don't steep it very long. We have actually a Zojiruchi tea maker that keeps the water at the perfect temperature. And my tea is loose. So we get tea from Rishi Tea, which is actually a local company that goes all over the world to find fair trade, really rare teas, and they're fabulous. And I drink Jade Cloud, and you don't steep it very long. Very short, very short.
Okay, this is good to know. I've heard of Rishi actually because I want to say some of their adaptogen type of mixes that they were doing that some women that I know that are really, really into clean eating were drinking for a while. So I'm pretty sure that's where I got kind of exposed to it. So good to know. I will check that out for sure. Because yeah, I do love a good green tea. It feels really healthy for you. I know matcha has kind of become the extension of that. But whenever I steep it, it becomes really bitter. I'm not really sure about it. I feel like I'm not doing it properly. So, you know, everybody knows that I'm an oat milk espresso lover. It has to be pretty fancy kind of cafe thing. I was born in France, so the European kind of espresso culture runs pretty thick in me. But green tea is better for you. So I mean,
green tea is so good for you. The only way I can drink coffee, I don't like the taste of coffee. The only way I can drink it, I mean, these refreshers have like a green coffee bean, or I can do a frappuccino. And my son says, Mom, that is not coffee. My kids are coffee fanatics. They're like, that's dessert. That doesn't count. And I'm like, you know what? You're right.
Dessert. And Theresa, I actually love that you're bringing this up because no one has ever talked to me about refreshers before. I went through a huge refresher phase, and like yourself, I would go to Starbucks and I said, what happened to the refreshers? They're gone. Or they have these new mixes now that are like guava. I don't even know what's happening. It's too much. I just want the anyways. And then I thought yesterday, I really want something refreshing but caffeinated in the afternoon. Yes. I had a big weekend and I was really tired. And I was like, do frappuccinos still exist? And I really thought about getting a frappuccino. And to your son's point, I do find them, my issue is that when things, I don't take any sugar in my coffee. So when things are too sweet, I feel it's a little bit too much. So anyways, I hesitated, and I almost was like, who reads the menu at Starbucks anymore? Everybody just rolls in and know what their order is. So I didn't feel like being that person either at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So suffice to say, I got an iced oat milk latte. Same thing as I always get. But this has been a great little sort of intro to everything, because I love hearing how we start our day and what our rituals and our routines are. And you know, in the work that we do too, having that routine and that carving out that time for yourself before you jump on. And I have Gemini in my 6th house. It's my full 6th house in Placidus, which is a system of reading charts for those of you who are tuning in right now. And Gemini, just you're a Gemini sun, right, Theresa?
Gemini sun, Mercury sun, Jupiter and Gemini, or Mercury. I have the sun, Mercury, Jupiter, and my North Node all in Gemini.
Incredible. Wow. Yeah. So
all
a lot
packed
of Gemini.
In the 8th house, all crammed in that 8th house.
Wow. 8th house is one of my favorite houses. The 8th and the 12th are, you know, I think in true Scorpio form, which you can relate to, because the 8th house, even though yours is Gemini, takes an undertone of Scorpio with it. Is just really kind of an obsession of mine, because I like to know, you know, what's really going on beneath the surface. Yeah. And so, yeah, what I was going to say is that with the 6th house, which is our daily rituals and routines and the work that we do, having mine in Gemini and yourself being, you know, so much Gemini energy, we tend to be really busy. We're busy in our heads, we're busy in our lives. And so that sacrilegious kind of like start to your day is really, really critical, just to kind of carve out the time for yourself and really have a focus on where you're going to start your day. And I, you know, kind of a little bit of an aside to the depths of the conversation I want to get into, but I have to say, Theresa, I'm so impressed. And you know, I'm curious to know, maybe from an astrology point of view, where Capricorn is in your chart, or, you know, what your Mars is in. Is it in an Earth sign? Because your commitment to your lives at 11 a.m. just is such a really incredible commitment, from the point of view of myself having 6th house in Gemini, Neptune on the ascendant. I'm sort of all over the place. You know, I have a really hard time staying the course with something. And so to see you commit, and especially when we talk about Instagram, and I know you've expressed also your trials and tribulations with that platform, as we all have our own, you know, depending, it can be a challenging space to commit to and to show up to every day. And so I would love you to maybe shed a little bit just on the energy that you have, the commitment that you have, the relationship that you have that allows you to show up consistently at the same. Whenever I've tuned into your lives, it's always the same sort of Theresa that we're getting. There's really this consistency. And that's why I ask about, you know, the Earth sign. Is it that grounded energy? Is your Mars in an Earth sign, so that you can have the momentum to show up in a way that is notwithstanding any challenges, just really full throttle, you know? So yeah, speak to that a little bit if you can.
Well, I am a very reliable person. When I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. I also laugh because I also say I'm a commitment phobe. So when I commit to somebody, then it means something. When I commit to something, it means something, because I don't like to commit. I got that one little skittish part of my Gemini side where I want to always feel like there's a foot out the door. So I used to say when I was younger, I'm like, I'm not the best person to get married to. I've been married though for like 30 years to my current husband. So, you know, we've been together forever and a day, but it has to be right for me and I have to feel good. Then I can commit. And I actually have Capricorn intercepted in my 3rd house. So on the outside, you know, I've got that Sagittarius sitting on that cusp. I'm very philosophical, but on the inside, I've got a little bit of Martha Stewart to me, and I have a Mars in Virgo. I like to get things done. I've got 3 planets in Virgo. I also come from a long line of family who are workaholics. And we don't look at workaholism as a negative thing. When you love something that you're doing, you're going to show up and you're going to want to do it. It seems like if you're in a relationship where you really love someone, well, you're going to stick with it, even if you are commitment phobic. And my father was an incredible hard worker. And so he set a very good example for all of us. There were times where he had to work 3 jobs to support us. We did not have a lot of money growing up, but he loved to work. My father loved his work, and it was very humble work, but he was into it. And so all of my siblings, I have 3 siblings and me, there's not one lazy person in the family, and we all love going to work. We love working. We will stay in a job forever and a day if we enjoy it. And sometimes you don't want to tear us away from our work because we really are into it. And as far as those morning lives, I have to laugh about those because I hate the camera. I despise being on camera. I hate it so much. I hate getting my picture taken. I don't like being filmed. I don't like any of it. But what happened for this lives is my publisher said, listen, could you do some Instagram lives? When my astrology book came out, I'm like, really? So just a few, just like one for every sign of the zodiac or something like that. I said, fine, I'll get through this. I'll do it for you. And so I did these 12 little Instagram lives. And when I came to the last one, some of the people who were showing up were like, wow, this is really a lot of fun. Are you going to continue doing this? I'm like, let me see. I said, I'll give it a shot. I'll get up and give you a little forecast every day. And so I did, and people really enjoyed it. It seemed to really help them. And at the time here in the US, we were dealing with the election, the pandemic, and so many awful things were going on in the world that it started to become the thing where it's like, look, I'm going to get you through this crap. We're going to get through it. You're going to make it. Don't worry. And so I thought it was a way to help people feel like they had some understanding of how to work with the energy that was happening in the world and in the cosmos at that time. So, that's what started it. And it's been going now for a couple of years, I think 2.5 years. So it's really weird. And, there's been some learning curves along the way about boundaries and sometimes some not so great people coming on board. But even that hasn't stopped me. I'm like, you know what? This is helping somebody. It's helping someone, it's entertaining someone, maybe it's giving someone the push they need to get through their day. So let's just keep doing it for now.
So great, and totally speaks to so many of the things that were in the forethought of my question, the background of my question, like Mars and Virgo, for those of you listening, babes, Virgo's an earth sign. So Mars and Virgo really shows us that ritual and that, the tenacity that you have around that, and that the commitment, is a fantastic word to use it. And I love how you have Capricorn intersected in your third, the original house of Gemini. And so maybe that speaks a little bit to that, that commitment phobia a little bit. And the other thing too, with the 8th house and Gemini being in your 8th house is siblings, and it's those ancestral roots. And really you can see that those patterns that are from passed down from your parents and have really impacted the behavior of yourself and your 2 siblings, or your 3 siblings. Sorry, you said your 3 siblings. Yeah. And you guys, Theresa's lives is tarot, transits, and tangents. Is that it?
Yes,
tarot, transits, and tangents. And like so clever, so great. Tangents are such a great word for Gemini energy too. So you just sound like you're doing everything that is so aligned with your purpose, to be honest, Theresa. And I love that you mentioned also Sagittarius right on the cusp there, because when you spoke a little bit to being, I don't know if you used the word teacher, but there was something you mentioned a little bit earlier where I thought that's such a Sagittarian energy, is to really take the lead on something. And when you really believe in something and you want to show up and embody that and help people find their way. And so there's so many directions and so many things that I would love to speak about with you. One of the things right now that's coming to me is just around finding, you said you've been doing this work for 30 years, and there's so much about you that is as an author, as a writer, as a speaker, using social media, even something that you didn't necessarily feel comfortable, which again, might be Mars in Virgo, because all the Virgos I know tend to be a little bit camera shy. They want to kind of stay behind the scenes a little bit more. But I'm wondering, can you speak a little bit on finding your purpose, and maybe if it's familiar to you, using your birth chart to help navigate what our purpose looks like? And that's something that I think, I want to say women have struggled with a lot. And I don't think it's getting easier because we're so inundated with options.
Yes.
And as creatives, yourself being a creative, it can be challenging in this world to find our way, because it's not a space, it's not a conversation, unless we're very lucky to have been supported by our family of origin, where we can find our footing in the world. Oftentimes we're really conditioned or persuaded to go the norm. And
Mhm.
so I'm wondering what your journey has been a little bit with your career, with your line of work,
Yeah.
and maybe using your birth chart or astrology at least as a lens on what your purpose looks like.
Well, when I was young, I remember, I always say the defining incident in my life was when I broke my leg when I was 2 years old.
Mm.
And I was being really rambunctious, like most 2 year olds. I broke my leg. And at that time, I was in the hospital for 6 weeks in traction. And my parents had to leave me there because that's what happened in the 60s. 60s were different, It's not like now where you can hang out with your kid if they're in the hospital. And
My son just turned 2. The thought of him breaking his leg right now,
yes, it's horrible.
it is horrible.
Yes, and I was a very precocious 2 year old. And so I was in the hospital. My parents had to leave me there. And my mother gave birth to my sister while I was in the hospital.
Oh,
I mean, so, and while I
yeah.
was in the hospital, I learned to read because there was nothing to do but read and watch
Wow.
Sesame Street. So I came out of the hospital. I could read at like a grade school level. And I had a new sister. And I remember feeling like an alien in this family, like, huh. And I remember being an infant even, So I just remember thinking, okay, something's wrong here. This is not my people. And at that time, I couldn't really articulate it, but I felt like an alien in my own family. And I'm very, very different than my family. I mean, we do have some things in common, of course, because we have those ancestral things. But growing up, my father was 50 years old when I was born, also, by the way. So
Wow.
he came into parenthood late. He was born 1915. He was an old farm guy. And so and my mother was farm folks, and we
Yeah.
grew up in a rural area, and their whole thing was, everything was very normal, super religious. However, my
Mhm.
mother was also psychic, and so was her grandmother. And my other grandmother was the kind of religious type that would pray to all the saints. So there was always like,
Yes.
yes, there was the mystery, there was the intuition, there was this farm stuff, there was this rural area that I grew up. And in this whole area, I just remember not fitting in with this family, not fitting in with the kids at school. I always knew that I was meant to do something different with my life. I didn't know what it was going to be, but I always knew I'm going to do something different. And I always had teachers telling me, you're very different. You're very
Mm.
different. And I remember too, when I was young, thinking, what the hell does that mean? But I knew they were right. I never quite fit in. I remember when I was 12 years old, out in this rural area, I was the first person in our area to discover punk rock. And I still laugh about it. So I was always like looking at different things. I wanted a different life. I knew that I was here to do something, but again, I didn't know what. I had a lot of really rebellious ideas. And what ended up happening is while I was trying to figure out who I am, I had the good fortune of connecting with another girl in school who was a fellow misfit. And her mother was an astrologer, which in the area
Wow.
I grew up in was weird.
Well,
Uh,
also, I just have to say, I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but it's just so interesting because so much of what you're describing sounds
mhm,
to me familiar in the vein of it being a little bit like my grandmother grew up on a farm,
yep,
and she was born in 1920, so it's
mhm,
close in age with your father. And I do feel like that intuitive psychic kind of thing is rooted in my family, except for they definitely, that my side of it was never talked about. So I find it really, really
mhm.
incredible, to be honest, that you found a colleague and a friend that kind of you could connect
Yes,
with on this, and that her mother was that's like really paramount for that time. This was something,
yes.
from my understanding, you kept really hush hush. If you had that gift, it wasn't like the world we live in today at all.
No, but like Elisa Kelly, the astrologer, says, a tank,
Mhm.
there are no coincidences,
Yes.
everything does kind of pan out. And it's really funny, my parents were both eighth grade educated. You didn't go to school, you
Yeah.
quit to work on the farm. That's the way
Yeah.
things were back then.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I find with people who oftentimes have a limited education is they are more intuitive because they have to operate in the world somehow. And the intuition is often the thing that guides them. So, my mother was extremely psychic. My grandmother was psychic. And sometimes I would even think, how the hell did these guys make it in the world? It was their intuition. So that was something that was very honored in my upbringing. It wasn't seen as a
Wow.
weird thing because that's how they had to navigate. So when this
Incredible.
woman did my astrology chart, and I was 15 at the time,
I was gonna, how old are you? Okay, 15. Okay.
yes, and I remember being like, this is it. This is the answer. And so I got immediately obsessed with it.
Do
And
you
I
remember
thought,
what she pointed out in
I
specific
don't
that really?
remember. No, I don't
Okay.
remember very much. I don't
Okay.
anymore. But I just remember she did it. I was fascinated and super into it. And I've got a moon in Scorpio. So when I get into something, I really get into it. And so I started studying astrology. And by the way, when she passed on, I actually inherited the book that she had, which I am so grateful for. But I was like looking to learn it. And it was one of those rare times we went to the mall, which, you know, was quite an ordeal back then. It was a drive. You had to go there,
Yeah.
blah, blah, blah. And I wasn't like other girls. I didn't want to go clothes shop. I didn't give a crap about that. I went straight to the bookstore. I always went to the bookstore. And I went to the metaphysical section looking for an astrology book, specifically her book. And her book was out of print, by the way. So I was digging around, and then I saw a tarot deck, and I'm like, ooh, I've seen this in the movies. I've seen things about this. And I picked up that deck, just boom, you know, not even thinking about it, on impulse.
Yeah.
Took it home, and the tarot, because I'm a visual person, started singing to me. And I knew I was onto something. And then I've had a tarot deck in my hands ever since. And here's the interesting thing about my parents. My parents didn't, I mean, they had a lot of ideas about, oh, you should go to church, you need to do this, you need to do that. But when it came to that, they just ignored it. So I never had anybody interfering, telling me it was wrong. They were too busy doing their own thing and trying to make it in the world. So I was allowed to work with that tarot, and it could flourish. I had nobody judging it, nobody telling me what to do. I didn't have any mentors. I had one book, and that was it. And I just practiced on anybody who would let me. And never in a million years did I think it would become a career. It became a career 10 years, actually a little more than 10 years later, after I'd been reading for some time. It became my career, became my life's calling. And I just never thought it would happen like that. And that was the time then when I started doing it for a living. Then my parents had an attitude about it. They're like, oh my God, you know, everyone's going to think how weird we are. We can't tell anybody what you do for a living. Our daughter's a fortune teller. And I'm like, listen, I don't care. This is my thing. I'm almost 30 years old now. I'm doing it. And, you know, that was that.
I love that you kind of intercepted your point to really speak to your parents in the context, because so many of us with our creative pursuits don't necessarily have that support for a variety of reasons. It can be that our parents are threatened by our creative potential, that our caregivers, you know, family of origin is threatened by that. Or it can just be that, you know, someone like my husband, for instance, who has Neptune in the 3rd house, his family, we can really see the link, is completely thinks dreams are unrealistic, completely unrealistic. And there's just no rhyme or reason for you to ever make that a tangible reality. So much Taurus energy for them. And so, you know, and for myself, my mom is a creative and definitely has the psychic thing and everything, but had no support in pursuing that. I think it's a question of timing too, time that her parents could give to her. They were very busy. It was different, and women didn't work in the way that we're working now. So there wasn't necessarily that focus. It was more, who are you going to marry, I think, and how are you going to settle down, and how are you going to, you know, grow our roots. And I don't know my birth father, and my stepdad is a very well-established businessman. And so logic reason. So there was no support for my creative growth. In fact, to be honest, I think my family found it a little bit annoying. It was like, you can go do an art class here and there, but don't bring that back home, because that just kind of gets in the way with my OCD of everything needing to be clean. And you can't actually do anything with that down the road. So it's a hobby, nothing more than that. So how did having that support shape you as an extension to, you know, the another question, which is moving in the direction of this deck of tarot cards that you just created? You know, so much of what I'm compelled to ask you about and speak to you about is your relationship with nourishing children and just having been nourished as someone who was young, not necessarily, you know, below the age of 7, but to pursue their creative interests without limitations, where the parents weren't necessarily worried, well, what does this outcome have for us? What does this mean for us? How can I just encourage my children to be who they are and explore what's meaningful to them?
Well, my parents, they didn't care about the tarot stuff. I mean, they left me alone with that. My parents were actually quite oppressive. They definitely had a lot of old-fashioned ideas about what a girl should be like. And
Right.
I mean, my mother was a very sick woman physically and mentally. And she had a lot of my parents had issues. I don't look at that as a negative. It's like, hey, listen, whatever. But
Yes.
they were extremely oppressive, and our household was actually very verbally and physically violent. So there was also that we had in the background. I'm glad they left my tarot alone. And so they were loving
I'm
parents.
nodding my head because I feel that from my understanding, my parents were immigrants to Canada. Sorry, my grandparents were immigrants to Canada. My mom was the firstborn of her family. I feel that, in that era, physical and verbal abuse wasn't as identified as negative as it is today.
Yep.
It was more commonplace, as my understanding. It doesn't make it right in any way, but I agree completely with your point of view. As nowadays there's so much dialogue around pinpointing it and trying to get over it, and sometimes
Yep.
having shame is such an eighth house thing, or just rejection around that. It's also celebrating the roots that we've come from and how that's made us exactly who we are. Maybe that's also my stellium in Scorpio. That is very much, kind of axé, directional to that point of view, which your moon would be able to relate to. But there's something to be said about living in conjunction with that story versus overcoming it or not overcoming it necessarily. It just kind of is. It's there, and it for that time it wasn't necessarily the worst thing or the most unnatural thing either, as it lands for many of us in today's world, because that would be completely unacceptable. Now,
it was a different time. It really was. Not that again, I don't make excuses for any of the things. I don't look at it also like, oh my God, how awful. I'm like, okay, they did the best they could. And so now what's my choice? My choice was to break the wheel. And it's interesting because I was always the weird one in the family. I was the weird one in school. My parents were always like, just like, you get married, get a job in a factory, then or you're going to get a job as a secretary, then you're going to be that's living large to them. And I just remember, that they would say a lot of things too about men are superior, blah, blah, blah. And I just never believed them. And it seemed like in school, I would have people saying, oh, you're weird, you're ugly, you're this or that, but I just never believed it. And the difference between
that's a gift.
It is. I just never believed it. I'm like, yeah, whatever. Whereas like my sister, who's very sensitive, my sister's very glamorous and she lives in Canada, by the way. She's very beautiful. My sister took everything to heart, every negative thing she took to heart. So it's really funny, as beautiful and glamorous as my sister is, we're completely different. I'm very confident. I'm like, yeah, whatever. And she took a lot of that really, really into her system.
I love that you made that association, because coming from the fashion industry, as so many of my audience can understand too, it does sort of attract that kind of person that has this persona of having it all pulled together and stylistically being the whole thing, but inside there's such a fragility.
Yeah, she's there. She is. I mean, and my sister is beautiful. She's smart. She's hilarious, but she's got a lot of things that she is still working on. And I always have to say, why did you ever believe that stuff? That's the thing. What you take in and what you believe can dictate a lot on how you live. And so it's so important. I was just talking about this on Instagram, that we cannot consume a lot of garbage. It's got to be, that garbage has to be out. If I look at the news too much, I know I'm going to feel down. If I listen to somebody else's review or opinion of me and it's a negative one, that's going to affect the way I feel about, well, actually it probably won't, because I don't care. But but
a little bit, it like trickles in somehow.
It's still there. It's still there. If you are on social media too much, you can really get depleted from it. So we have to be careful what we consume, and we have to be really careful about consuming other people's opinions of us, because it's not healthy for us. Your opinion of yourself is what matters. And when it came down to my parents, I just never believed that garbage. And I remember when I became a parent, and believe me, I've had my moments as a parent where I've certainly not been perfect, but I was like, no, we're breaking the wheel. We're breaking the wheel. This is not going to be a verbal or physically violent relationship with my children. And it's interesting because, my relationship with my children is completely different than my parents' relationships were with their children. Completely different, because I did things very, very opposite of them.
That is so encouraging. I'm excited about that because I feel I'm raising Quinn, my son, completely differently to how I was raised or what my parents believe in. And he's only 2, so I'm in the thick of it, to be honest with you. But
2-year-olds are so much fun. They're like
I know.
little rebels. They're so exciting.
It's his personality is really coming out, which is so fun. And I love communicating with him and being able to see what he likes and what he dislikes and giving him space and freedom, which I think, we're in the phase right now where everybody's like, oh, the terrible twos. And I was just talking with a friend how I think that's a horrible statement because it's so condescending and doesn't help me or him deal with what he's going through. So I'm excited to see how our relationship develops based on, like yourself, seemingly taking a totally different road than my parents did. And how do maybe as an extension to a question too, how did your kids feel in terms of the work that you're doing with, empowering children? What is your, as you were creating this tarot deck for children, what is your vision for that deck? What inspired you to really create a deck specifically for children? What does that mean to you?
Well, first of all, my publisher Sounds True approached me and said, what do you think about doing a deck for kids? And I said, oh my God, yes. Because, all the decks when my kids were young, and when I was young for that matter, they always had like naked adults in it, words like the Hierophant, things that a kid wouldn't really be able to relate to. Think about this. If you're like a 9-year-old, you probably don't want to look at a deck with a bunch of adults disrobed. And some of the concepts behind regular tarot decks, original tarot decks, were also very difficult. They didn't relate to a child's life. And so when they brought that up, I'm like, oh my God, this is brilliant. I can do it. Because I remember what it's like to be a kid. I remember what it's like to be that odd kid, that weird kid, the one that didn't fit in, the one that was intuitive, the one that felt everything maybe too strongly. I remember being that child, how I would have loved to have a tarot deck when I was a little girl. I feel very fortunate. I came across one when I was a teenager and nobody got in my way, but I would have loved that. So as soon as they said, oh my God, can you do this? I said, yes. So they picked the artist and then I wrote the book and I wrote it and I really went into the whole feeling. If I was a child, what would be the concepts that I would understand? What would I want to talk about with my friends? Seeing tarot as a friend, what would make sense for a child? So I approach it from that perspective. And also I did not dumb it down. I know there are a few decks out there that are aimed at kids, but they dumb it down. They dumb it down. I'm like, number one, kids are not dumb. Kids are really smart. They're very intuitive. And so it's based on a very traditional deck. There's just a few things we changed to make it themes that children could relate to.
I heard that you changed the death card, for instance, was a card, right? That's called change.
To change.
Yeah.
And I also included reversals, which, a lot of people think kids can't learn reversal. I'm like, listen, kids can learn a second or third or fourth language from the jump. So what are you talking about? So we did make the deck intelligent, but also really based around kids' needs. And it's so funny, I talk to my children a lot. Their adults were very close. And even now they will rely on me for, astrology advice or tarot advice or even just life advice. And I was just talking to my son the other day and he was like, all stressed out about something. I said, what are you afraid of? Well, I don't want to fail. And I said, you've never failed in your life. You don't know what it's like to fail. Everything you've done, you've been a winner. So why are you freaking out? And he's like, just pause it. And he goes, you're right. I haven't really failed yet. I said, go ahead. What's the worst that can happen? Maybe you will fail. Who cares? You've never failed before. You've got this. You got to believe in yourself. And that is all stuff that I believe that I translate through all the work that I do. And I think for children, it is especially that children learn to honor their own intelligence and their own intuition. And so why not give them a tool like tarot? And why not give them the space to play with those cards or to look within or to become introspective and to trust that little voice that's within them? That's my mission.
So I absolutely love this point of view. And I have to say, I think it's your 8th house that really is coming through in your perspective on what kids can handle. Because, Scorpio energy, which you and I both have in different regards. Your moon is in Scorpio, and you have that stellium in the 8th house, which is Scorpio energy. And I'm just a straight out Scorpio stuck in a Capricorn house, the 10th house. And then the sun, Venus, Mercury, and Jupiter all in Scorpio for me. And so That perspective wants to go deep, and it doesn't
Mhm.
want to hide anything, and it doesn't want to hide from anything. And I think that this kind of dialogue or rhetoric that we have around children being less than is
Mhm.
really not supportive for their growth. And so I'm listening to it. I'm actually very, very excited to get Quinn that deck, and
Mhm.
explore it with him. And I'm also thinking of this young boy who, just right before the pandemic, it was like March 12th, 2020, and I was sitting at a cafe and I had my deck and I was doing a reading for a friend, and I was working with Rider Waite, and he came up to me and he was like, "What is this?" And he was
Mhm.
so curious. Is the owner's son, and I remember trying to explain it to him, but I wasn't really sure. And then I happened to have actually this deck, which is a cheeky fun deck called the Affirmators.
Oh, I have that deck. It's so cute.
So cute. And you know what I have to say, Theresa? This deck, similar to your story of being in the bookstore, was how it was hidden at the bottom of a
Mhm.
mainstream bookstore here in Canada called Chapters. And it was
I
just
know
at the bottom of the shelf.
chapters.
And I was bending down, and the color caught my eye. I had no notion of tarot whatsoever. The color caught my eye, and my grandmother had just passed.
Mm.
And I learned after that, her communicating language, color, sorry, for me was purple.
Mhm.
And I picked it up just on an intuitive whim, and I started looking at these cards and exploring them. And so this is a very meaningful deck for me, because some of yourself, it's kind of what launched everything for me in a lot of ways, and what allowed me mostly, to be honest. Tarot is something that I love to do and practice. There's a lot of responsibility around it in relation,
Yes.
especially to today's work, and I don't think a lot of people understand that. Maybe it's because I'm almost 40 that I feel the depths of that, so I don't take it lightly. But it allows me to practice my intuition a lot.
Yes.
And that young child, when I showed him this deck, was
Mhm.
like, can I hold it? Can I play with it? And I said, of course, this is so cool. He was maybe 7 years old. And
Yes.
so, your deck is going to be so helpful and healing, actually, for a lot of people. And I think a lot of parents could benefit by just offering their kids a tool like that can help them. My perspective of tarot is that intuitive hunch. It's helping
Yes.
you learn to read something that has not necessarily, yes, they all come with a guidebook, right? But we're often told when we're the real deal that we don't need to use that book, that we just have to focus on the messages that we're getting. Like you said yourself, like the deck
Mhm.
just sang to you.
Mhm.
So I think that it'll be really beautiful also to see, as because your deck, it came out recently, right? Is it the
Yes, a couple
summer?
weeks ago.
Oh, a
A
couple
couple
weeks
weeks
ago. Okay.
ago.
So
Brand new.
brand new. So as it gets in the hands of people, to see the stories of what their children are
Mhm.
going to be exploring. And I wonder if there, from my vantage point, I'm thinking about my audience, and I'm thinking about all of us working through the artist way. We're working through
Yes.
the fifth house, challenges with our creative work, and creative worth. Those two things. I'm someone that has Chiron and Taurus in my fifth house, and
Mm.
this was really interesting because the sun is 14 degrees of Scorpio, exactly conjunct, I should say, Venus at 14 degrees of Scorpio. So my creative worth is strong, but there is a fracture there that is also very strong.
Mhm.
And growing up, I wasn't encouraged. It was very compartmentalized.
Mhm.
And there was not really a real discussion around a woman's creative worth, around creativity. Granted, one of my brothers is hugely artistic and does a lot of interior design work and renovations and that sort of thing. But maybe because he was a man, there was more of a respect for that. And so as the women in this community are working through their own challenges, how do you think, even, I think even just listening to you talk about the deck, I thought even someone who's an adult who's learning how to read
Yes.
tarot, who's learning how to connect with their intuition, could probably benefit with
Mhm.
the real deal deck like yours, that sees us go deep, that sees us not neglect what we can handle, but in a
Mhm.
way that articulates, it isn't too complex, is really
Mhm.
just kind of straightforward and face value. And so I'm sure there's adults that can use your deck and explore their creative worth. And what do you think that relationship is as well for that younger generation, maybe, who might have more power in their hands through a deck like that to understand what they're capable of intuitively? That's a great gift that we can give them when we
Mhm.
can help people understand that their intuition is a big part of them and should not be denied and shouldn't be ignored, and they should never accept that it doesn't exist.
Mhm.
and how we can use that as a resource to move into our joy ultimately, which is so tied with, guys, like the fifth house is ruled by Leo, and it's really, that means it's also ruled by the sun. And so it's our
Mhm.
essence and our vibrance and how we come alive and how we shine our light and how we feel comfortable from our solar plexus chakra, which is just really near our belly button, to really shine our truth in confidence out in the
Mhm.
world. And sometimes when we are stunted in those regards for a variety of reasons from our caregivers, we can feel like we are, almost like one foot out the door of really wanting to accept and own our creativity. And that can mean so
Mhm.
much. It can mean not charging fairly for our work. It can
Mhm.
mean not wanting to do our work in the world because we don't feel like we're worthwhile. So for me, honestly, Theresa, there's so much of this deck beyond just being targeted or made or curated for children that can help adult children as well heal,
Yes. Well, I've
right?
got I've got Chiron in my fifth house and Saturn. And my
Mm.
Saturn is squared off with my Sun and my Mercury and opposing my natal Mars. So I've got this massive T square in mutable signs.
Yes.
And, I
Yeah.
remember going through periods too where I felt very creatively blocked. And that happens when you're told, you're weird or that's this or whatever. Even though I didn't believe it, life got busy and I wasn't able to be as creative as I really wanted to for some time until later in life. And so I think for people like myself, working with tarot for kids or something of that nature, it can help you to heal that inner child. That child who was told you're weird, you're different, or you shouldn't be doing that. That's not normal. I mean, if my parents would have had their way, if my parents would have had their way, oh my God, I would not live the life that I've lived. And I've had a life that sometimes they thought was very shocking because it's been very unconventional. Their goal would have been for me to stay married, be a housewife, get a job at a factory, be a secretary, be mom's caregiver. That would have been the fantasy life for them. And my life just went a very, very different route.
Mm.
And, even so, there's of course those points where there's still some healing work that I need to do. And I find that tarot is a way to really understand, well, in astrology for that matter, you can understand
Yeah.
yourself, you can find where the problems are, you can begin working through them, understanding yourself, forgiving yourself, and also being able to look at the people who maybe did their best but did harm with compassion. It's all
Mm-hmm.
about compassion. And the other thing that I find with tarot and astrology for that matter is when we understand where those pain points lie, that's when the real magic begins. We always want to look at the good stuff. Now, forget the good stuff, look at the tough stuff. Go in there, dig in there, work on your Chiron, work on your Saturn. You heal that, you heal yourself, you can heal the world. So, learning how to do that is really, really powerful stuff. And for children, when we give them something like tarot or astrology, we're showing them that they have choices, that they have agency, that the choices they make today impact their tomorrow. And even if they make choices they don't like, they can always make another choice tomorrow. And tarot and astrology help them to remember that. And it also helps them become more conscious. And that is the whole secret to a graceful life, being conscious of your choices, your motives. How many people have a motive for something and they don't really check that? And they don't really look within, what is my motive? I mean, I'm always asking myself, what is my motive? What do I want to get here? What do I want to glean from this situation? What will this give to me? Or how will this help me? Or how will this harm others? And tarot is one of those introspective tools where you can really look within and ask yourself all these big questions. And why not getting children asking big questions at a young age? And why not, as adults, why are we done asking questions? We need to be asking questions all the time. And I think tarot helps you to do that and also helps you to find the answers.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. I absolutely couldn't agree more. And as you're speaking, everything resonates really profoundly for sure. I love the point on Saturn and Chiron and just focusing on that because it's so true. I was born November 7th, 1982, one
Mhm.
day before Saturn and Pluto went exactly conjunct. So I have
Mhm.
it conjunct both at 27 degrees of Libra, but just off
Mhm.
by the minutes. Um, and that's a really interesting placement. It squares off with my moon in Leo, which is in
Mm.
my seventh house in Placidus. Um, And yeah, my Venus back over on top of my sun with my Chiron. So there's a lot of pain and a lot of sensitivity around the powers that be, if you will,
Yep.
you know, and learning my own power. And I think so many of the women, not even I think, so many of the women in not even so many of them, every single woman in the community has a really strongly placed sun, whether it's in the first house, yeah, or at the midhaven, or it's in a strong sign. They all have really, really predominant suns. And these are women who are often hiding from their truth or feel insecure around really owning their magic. And one thing that kind of came to me just as we wrap up was really wondering about what if, so one of the questions that I get from mostly clients who have come to me for a reading more than once, they'll ask me, I have a deck, or I have an oracle deck, and I'm really not that good, but sometimes I pull a card, and I always encourage them, and I think they feel this. And I mean, I've only been doing readings professionally for like a year and a half. And even at that, I know my limits, sort of thing. And I know I've learned also where to draw the line and what I feel I can speak on and what I don't feel experienced enough yet to speak on. Because I think my Mars intercepted in Capricorn first house, that pressure is really intense on me, where I feel the responsibility of holding space for, what is accurate, and also what I can handle. And I put a lot of pressure on myself to be honorable in that regard. But I always encourage them to explore. It's not about comparing yourself to me or feeling intimidated by me. I started through curiosity, as you did, and all of these tools are tools that aim at the root of it to encourage our curiosity to get to know ourselves. And so I think that curiosity is really relevant in terms of how would you encourage someone who maybe has never worked with a tarot deck, or maybe is curious about astrology but maybe a little bit intimidated? It's also so saturated online today. One of my least favorite things is everybody's making fun of all the zodiac signs, all these memes. It's not an empowering dialogue around it at all. And I even have a reels where I said, like, it's not astrology. It's really find the reader that's going to make you feel really good, because you should never feel bad about your zodiac makeup. You should feel really good about who you are. And so what's your take on that, as someone who's maybe curious, and is thinking maybe of picking up your deck for themselves, or maybe for their niece or nephew or child? How can we give ourselves the freedom, and what can we benefit from that? How do we approach the deck when we've never held a deck before? Do we put pressure on ourselves to have to know all the things or read the guidebook, or do we just, what's the Theresa way?
Well, first of all, if I feel pressured on anything or guilt tripped on anything, I'm going to be ditching it in a minute, just so you know. I do not like that vibe. That's not a healthy vibe for anything. So I think, first of all, the first time you get a deck, just spend time with it. Spend time with it. That's all you can do. Spend time with it. I think it is important to learn the fundamentals, and there are many good books out there on the fundamentals. So get a good book, get a deck that you're drawn to, one where the art speaks to you, and just spend time with it. And when it comes to astrology, astrology is very complex. You should actually work with a good astrologer or a good teacher to help you to learn the basics. I think with tarot and astrology, you need to learn the basics. Some people say, just say what's off the top of your head with tarot. I don't agree with that. I think you need to understand the structure of the tarot deck. You need that. It's a jumping off point. And with astrology, you also need to understand the basics. So a good teacher or mentor makes all the difference. Astrology can tell you a lot about your life purpose when you learn how to work with it properly. Tarot can help you to navigate the ups and downs and make good decisions.
Yeah.
So get a deck you love, get a good book, get a good astrology book, find a teacher or mentor whose style you like, and work with them, because that's going to help you to be confident. One other thing I will also say, tarot and astrology become a lot more mainstream. Now, I'm almost 60 years old. I'm old enough to be your mother. And I remember back when I started, there was still a lot of stigma and taboo around it. And there still is to some degree, but not like it was. Not like it was. It was bad. I mean, if I told people as a tarot reader, this is what my parents didn't like me talking about, people would literally do this to me.
Oh, yeah, I believe it. Yes.
Yeah, which was weird. But it's different now. It's more mainstream. And so the good thing is a lot of the stigma around tarot and astrology is going away. Yay. But the bad thing is there are people coming into it who are looking at it now like, oh, I can just get some cards and start making some money.
Yeah.
And they don't engage in the craft of it. There is a craft to tarot. There is a craft to astrology. It requires patience. It requires a lot of learning. And I think there are so many people who are in such a hurry to turn their hobby into a vocation that they're doing a disservice. And they're out there and they're doing harmful tarot readings, or they're doing astrology. They're doing an astrology reading and they don't even know what a damn ephemeris is. Now, I've got a problem as an old school tarot reader and astrologer. You need to know those things. Don't be in a hurry to monetize this stuff. Spend time with it. Get to know it. Get your relationship with tarot and astrology good before you start doing it for other people. And if it's meant to be your vocation, great. If it's meant to be your own personal tool, awesome. If it's something you play around with and just goof around with it once in a while, that's fine too. Just make sure you honor the craft, though, if you're going to get serious about doing this as a vocation. And one thing I like to tell for people when they want to know about their life purpose, look to your midheaven. That's going to tell you a lot about your purpose and how to work with whatever type of work you want to do in the way that's going to be best for you and the people you're going to serve. So learn all about your midheaven. Take your time and please honor the craft. I know this mainstream stuff, everyone's excited about it now. They're making fun of it or trying to make a lot of money off of it. And it's like, that's an insult to the craftspeople. Learn the bones. Please learn the bones. Take it seriously.
Yes. And I agree with you so much. You know, I think there is such a haste right now. And I think that everybody's just in a bigger hurry than the next person, and that pressure to do things really quickly, but not necessarily really well, because there's not that same consideration for some being well versed in something. You know, I love that you brought up the curiosity was sort of something that you kind of spoke to, is just be curious, whether you want to do it professionally or you want to do it just casually. Always be curious. And that even extends to get yourself a teacher. And you know, it's funny you mentioned Elisa Kelly. She was my first teacher. I love
her.
Yes, I know.
She's so smart.
Her interview with her on her latest book,
she's so smart. I've got the book over here. This is your destiny. Yeah, so good. She's so smart. And she's someone who's dedicated a decade to learning this.
Yes.
And there's nothing wrong with dedicating your time to it.
No.
Take your time. And here's the other thing. I've been doing tarot and astrology now. I mean, I did tarot and astrology professionally for 30 years, but I've been studying it for 40 years. And I still study, I still take classes, I still read books. You don't just one and done. And all of a sudden, hey, I'm like this tarot reader. And I know you can get these courses online. In 6 weeks, you're a professional tarot reader. I'm like, oh, no, that's dangerous. Because let me tell you something, as someone who's a longtime reader, guess who cleans up the mess of irresponsible tarot readers? Me.
You do. Oh, I believe it. I have done readings even just in my junior career, if you will, of people who have come to me and they're like, oh, this tarot reader. Some of them who admittedly have been well versed, but their language was more, I would say, patriarchal and negative and, focused on what isn't going to work out. Versus so fatalistic, actually.
Oh my God. Yes. Like I said, if I grew up believing everything my parents told me, my life would have turned out very different. I just didn't believe it. And if I get a reading with someone and it's really negative, I don't sit there and say, oh God, I'm doomed. I'm like, well, how can I fix this?
How can I fix this? Exactly. And that's a great, like sometimes even when people come to me for a tarot question, it's yes or no. And I always encourage them, how can I help you the most in this, actually? Because yes or no is maybe not the best. Let's look at the tools that you need to come by to overcome this situation. It's not about a yes or no. They think maybe it's the Libra midheaven, the Saturn-Pluto conjunction right over there at the 25-degree midheaven. I feel that responsibility of like the counseling, the helping someone feel supported and not like they are going to be burdened when they leave our experience together. And actually, guys, I just want to say to Theresa's point, I have been told that whether it's astrology, whether it's tarot, whether it was styling women before in fashion and supporting in this community, it's how I show up. That is the art of my life. And I think that speaks so much to the Libra midheaven, is my compass to be in relationships with people and to really help people understand themselves better and feel really good about themselves, because Libra is ruled by Venus and Venus is conjunct my sun. And so I really want women to feel so special. And so your point is so valid. It's not necessarily so much about, sometimes we can say like get so focused and precise on things, but the midheaven is the bigger picture.
Yes,
how
it's where you're going.
it's where you're going, right? Exactly. Yes.
Your
It's
your
absolutely.
your you know, your IC is where you're coming from, but your midheaven is where you're going, and it's your potential. You know, so and of course the way you're describing your Libra midheaven is so perfect. That is absolutely right. I mean,
Thank
that
you.
is the midheaven of the artist, the person who brings people together, who helps people to find the beauty and harmony in just being who they are. I mean, how perfect is that?
Thank you. It's taken me a while, but I feel, you know, what really just kind of solidified it recently too was Mercury just went retrograde in Libra and crossed my midhaven and then back
Ooh.
over. So, and I launched my community on September 15th, actually. So it felt really poignant through that retrograde that all of this was kind of just really solidifying, you know, it's sort of a coming of age, I guess, a little bit.
Yes.
Yeah. So do you have any final words of wisdom, anything that you'd love us to know about, you know, something you're working on or something you want to share with us in the present moment that comes to you astrologically, energetically, whatever it is, we would be open to receiving it for sure.
Well, one thing I'm going to say is Jupiter's going into Pisces later this year. If you've been feeling a little bit hopeless about the way things have been going, hope is returning. 2022 is going to be a much easier year. The planets have been very gnarly since 2012. They're going to be a lot better starting next year. So at the end of this year, it's going to end on a good note. We're going to be done with a lot of this really, really hard stuff. But I think it's really important for everybody to look back at the last couple of years. Who have you become through this? And what are you going to do going forward with everything that you've learned over the last couple of years? We've all gathered so much information. What are we going to do with it? And so let's start thinking about that.
I am so happy I asked you that question because you just gave us so much value. I mean, Jupiter going into Pisces is such a beautiful omen of what's to come, really and truly. We are going to be in the good graces of infinity and beyond, really.
Yes.
And truly,
and Jupiter was in Pisces for May, June, and July. And I told my daughter, my daughter's a very superstitious girl, and she was all freaking out about the pandemic. I said, May, June, and July is going to get better. And then we're going to backslide, but it will get better. And so it was very interesting when all of a sudden May rolls around here in the States, like, you don't need a mask anymore. My daughter's like, oh my God, life is going back to normal. You're right. I said, remember what I said, though, it's going to backslide. And then when we get to the end of the year and Jupiter goes into Pisces, then we really start rounding the corner.
Oh yeah,
so
we're so excited for that. It's because it's been tough. Even these last few weeks have felt really, really
heavy.
They've felt a little bit heavy, a little bit intense, to say the least. And the last couple of years, it's that really resonates with me. I became a mom. I didn't necessarily want to be a mom in my life, and so this has been a very interesting test for me. And I know all of us can relate at some level or another, because regardless of if nothing happened specifically to your life, the pandemic happened at a global level to your life. So we've all come by some major transformations one way or another. And I think a lot of it has been boundary work. So we are working through some tough personal growth right now. And it's not for the weak, that's for sure. But we can handle it. And Theresa, I'm so grateful. It's been so lovely chatting with you. I wish I could just hang out with you all the time. But honestly, you're so full of just enchantment and wisdom and just your approach to life. And I think we can all really, really take away from your strength of character and from your sort of this, I would love to even just sit down and talk with you and have coffee or tea, the whole thing around how you're able of just owning exactly who you are. You know, it's something I can definitely relate to, which I find really is something I've never struggled with at a physical level. It's always just like, this is who I am. I don't care. Take it or leave it. Where I think a lot of women struggle with their weight and all of that. And that's been really clear to me through gaining weight, becoming a mom, going from this super ego career to now just like a lot of more humility. And so I identify a lot with that. And I think that's a great conversation that so many women could benefit from hearing your vantage point on that, because a lot of us are born with a deep rooted feeling of not being enough that we carry.
Absolutely. But you know what? Mine all goes back to breaking my leg at 2 years old. Breaking my legs at 2 years old got me to be very independent very fast. And that was the key to everything. I've always been very independent in my thought and all that. It all comes back to that freaking accident. And so sometimes an accident can be the thing that really wakes you up. And again, like Elisa Kelly says, there are no coincidences.
There are no coincidences, Tank. There are no coincidences.
And we're all fine just the way we are. We are all Even if you are the biggest mess right now, you are fine just the way you are. You'll find your way. You just got to believe that. It all comes down to what you believe about yourself. You'll be fine.
You guys have to tune in to Theresa's Tarot Transits and Tangents every day, right? Is it every day at 11 a.m.?
Right around that time. It depends on what I have going on in my life, but usually right around, I like to say around 10 o'clock Central Time, I'm around there at that time. By that time, I'm usually awake and alive, and I have some red lipstick on my beak, and I'm raring to go.
I put on red lipstick for you today too.
I love it.
It's the winter look. I'm like, I don't want to wear makeup. I'm just going to put the red lip. It's very inspiring. It's a strong look. I love it.
Mm-hmm. It makes you feel good too.
It does. You feel pulled together with not much else necessarily having to go on. It's a great hack, I will say, for a mother to a young child. What I want to ask you before we leave you is, or before you leave us, is where can we reach you, and what can we look forward to? How can we look forward to supporting your work?
Well, thank you very much. People can always find me on thetarotlady.com. That is my main online hub. If they want to get my extended card of the day and all access to all my classes and my little live events, I do that on my Patreon account. I'm there at the Tarot Lady. I'm on Instagram in the mornings, usually get around 10 o'clock. So I give a daily forecast and pull cards for every sign of the zodiac. And I also have one offering I'm doing at this time. It's my AstroBiz Digest. And that is an astrological weekly forecast specifically for business owners. So those are the things that I've got going on. And next year, I have 2 more books coming out. One is called Learn to Paint Your Own Tarot Cards. And I'm working with an artist named Adrian on that. So cool. She's amazing. And then I have Twist Your Fate, How to Use Tarot and Astrology to manifest success. And that's coming out next fall.
Oh my gosh, those are must-haves already. I can't wait to own those. And I will be picking up and gifting. And I hope a lot of you guys do the same. Yes, this beautiful, beautiful deck for myself, as well as for the younger and aspiring tarot readers and aspiring intuitives in my life. Thank you so much, Theresa. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Extremely grateful. Thank you to all of you guys for listening. We will continue this conversation over in the coffee chat thread in Discord and over on Instagram. Please go follow and support Theresa, the beautiful work, and join one of her Tarot Transits and Tangents lives, because you will feel absolutely uplifted and inspired. She is super, super positive around her outlook for the day and her forecast. And we could all use that all the time, frankly, to be honest. You can never get enough of that. Wishing you a beautiful day, loves, and I will talk to you very soon.
Bye.